It's the summer of 2000, and 16-year-old Molly Bish is about to start what should be a simple day as a lifeguard at Comins Pond in small-town Warren, Massachusetts. Her mom drops her off, relieved not to see the creepy guy with a mustache who'd been lurking in a white sedan the day before. But a few hours later, Molly's gone, her flip-flops left abandoned at her post, as if she'd just simply vanished into the thick Massachusetts air. As the search unfolds, what should be a straightforward investigation spirals into a mess of bungled leads and suspects who, one by one, slip through the cracks. Even decades later, the question still hangs heavy. Who took Molly Bish, and how did they manage to disappear themselves? In this episode, we unravel the haunting story of Molly's disappearance, the tale of a small town forever changed and a family left searching for answers that they may never find. Hang tight. We're diving into a tale that's equal parts mystery, misfortune, with a truly haunting question. Who took Molly Bish, and why? Welcome to 10-Minute Murder. It was the summer of 2000 that would change young Molly Ann Bish's life forever. While other 16-year-olds across Massachusetts were home from school for the summer season, Molly was on her way to her job. But it wasn't quite a job like any other. Molly actually worked as a lifeguard at Comins Pond in Warren, meaning that she was ready to spring into action and risk her own life at the drop of a hat. Her mother, Maggie, would drive Molly out to the parking lot a short distance away from the lifeguard post before her shifts. Molly would then either get a ride back with someone she knew, or her mother would pick her up again. This was how most of Molly's summer days went. But that, unfortunately, would not be the case for the day of June 27th, 2000. The day had started off same as any other. Molly had a shift at Comins Pond, and Maggie drove her out there. But Maggie was a little on edge. While she'd been dropping off Molly the day before, she'd noticed something in the car park that had left her uneasy. A white man with a thick mustache had been sitting in a white car the day before, seemingly waiting for something, and the sight of him alone had sent chills down Maggie's spine. Molly's shift the day before had gone just as fine as normal, but Maggie feared that the strange man would be waiting in the parking lot again on June 27th. She drove Molly up to the lifeguard post, and then she let out a sigh of relief. There was no white car in sight. Maggie dropped Molly off, said goodbye, and then headed back home. But only a few short hours later, she received a chilling phone call. It was the police, and they had some horrifying news. Not only did it look like no lifeguards had been on duty at the pond the entire day, but no one could actually find Molly. Her belongings, including her flip-flops, were still at the post, as was a first aid kit that looked like it had just been opened and then left there. Molly's parents and the police descended upon the scene and frantically began searching for Molly. The initial theory behind her disappearance was that she had possibly drowned in the lake while on the job, and this was based off the fact that her belongings were still at the post when she wasn't. The investigators also determined from physical evidence and witness testimonies that Molly had only been at the lifeguard post for around 15 minutes before she went missing. Molly's case was not treated with immediate suspicion, which must have come as some kind of initial relief to her family, but it would prove to be the investigation's undoing. The scene that Molly had disappeared from wasn't secured, and hundreds of people went through the post and the beach desperately searching for Molly. In fact, the search for Molly quickly grew into the biggest and most expensive search for a missing person in the entire state of Massachusetts. But from the get-go, it had started out on the wrong foot. As the investigators and the search parties continued to come back empty-handed, one question was asked. Was it possible that someone had taken the teenage girl? Hours turned into days and then into weeks, months, and years. In 2002, a hunter on Whiskey Hill in Palmer only a few short miles away from Molly's family home, made an unusual discovery. He spotted some blue fabric, similar to the type used in a bathing suit. At first, he thought nothing of it, but then he talked to a friend a few months later in 2003. His friend decided to call it in. The police sprang into action and conducted a shoulder-to-shoulder search of the area with over 200 people. They found the blue fabric again and discovered that it was indeed a bathing suit. But not only that, it was the very same bathing suit that Molly had been wearing the day that she disappeared. Now, with heavier hearts, the search continued, and they made one more chilling discovery only a few days later. They uncovered Molly's remains. Judging by what the investigators found, they believed she died the same day she'd gone missing, and though they couldn't determine her exact cause of death, they were certain that she had been murdered. It was clear that someone had taken Molly and then either dragged her out into the woods to kill her or had used the landscape to simply try to hide her remains. But who would do that to a 16-year-old girl, and why? With the discovery of her remains, the investigators remained hopeful that they would finally uncover another set of clues that would lead them to Molly's killer. But the going was tough, and the information on who had done this to the young girl remained elusive. It wasn't until 2009, 9 whole years after Molly had first disappeared, that the investigators were able to name some real suspects. All of them were men, and all of them had some sort of criminal history that involved the abuse of women or minors to some degree. And then someone posed the question of whether 2 similar murders could possibly be connected. In 1993, when Molly was only 10 years old, Holly Paranen, who was also 10 at the time, went missing from her grandmother's house in Sturbridge. She was later found dead in a forest in Brimfield. Sturbridge is only about 20 minutes away from Warren. The girls were the same age, and where their remains had been found had both been in wooded, secluded areas. This could suggest some possibility of a connection between the two and suggest that they could have possibly been carried out by the same suspect. But there was still more to come to further tie the two of them together, and it would turn out that Molly herself was the binding rope between them. During the desperate and frantic search for Holly, Molly had actually reached out to Holly's parents. Quote, "I'm very sorry," 10-year-old Molly wrote in her letter. "I wish I could make it up to you. Holly is a very pretty girl. She's almost as tall as me. I wish I knew Holly. I hope they found her." It was possible that the two investigative forces were looking for the same murderer, and physical evidence at the scene where Molly had been found pointed to one man, David Pouliot. Although what they found isn't open to the public, the district attorney did make a statement saying that what and where they'd found this physical evidence in relation to Holly's remains made the evidence extremely significant. This, coupled with the fact that investigators now believed that the same person who'd kidnapped and killed Holly could be the same person who'd kidnapped and killed Molly, meant that the next logical course of action for both investigations would be to bring in that person for questioning. But there was a major setback in that plan. By then, it was 2012, and David Pouliot had died in 2003. It was possible that David was the man behind both killings, but with no way of questioning him, that branch of the investigation hit a definitive dead end. But another man named as a suspect was Frank Sumner, a convicted rapist. He not only lived and worked in the area at the time of Molly's disappearance, but he also fit the description of the man that Molly's mother, Maggie, had seen while sitting in the white car the day before. In fact, that Maggie had been so relieved that there had been no man in a white car on the last day that she dropped her daughter off for work proved to be a little bit of a misdirection in and of itself. Witnesses would later say that a man with a mustache had been sitting in the car park at the lake only a few moments before Maggie drove in with Molly. Someone else would later say that they had spotted a man and a car matching that description in another parking lot that was connected to the lake via a path that very same day. Was it possible that Frank Sumner had something to do with Molly's death? As it would turn out, he not only matched the physical description of the man in the parking lot, but also had access to a white car. It would certainly seem that Frank was the culprit, or at least certainly seemed possible. But by then it was 2021, and Frank had died in 2016. The investigation hit another dead end, one that even DNA evidence and familial DNA sampling couldn't solve. To this day, Molly's case remains open and unsolved. Frank Sumner has been named an official person of interest, but without further evidence or information, the investigation appears to be at a standstill. 267 pieces of physical evidence are being kept safe, and over 6,700 leads and tips have been looked into to no avail. It's been 24 years since Molly first disappeared, soon to be 25, and Molly's family still carry the weight of what happened to her on their shoulders. Quote, "Molly's presence is missed every single day." Her sister Heather spoke on the anniversary of Molly's murder. "I miss my sister. It never ends. I don't look at the world the same way. My sister was taken by somebody, and I've learned there are many dangerous people out there." That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and thank you for taking the time to listen. If you're a brand new listener, welcome in. Make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this show right this minute. And if you listen in multiple places, I mentioned this before, but if you listen on several different apps, maybe you sometimes you're on YouTube, sometimes you're on Apple Podcasts, sometimes you're on Spotify. I do that. I jump around, and I subscribe to the podcasts that I listen to the most on all of them. So that would be my suggestion to do. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what is easiest for me, and what's easiest for me is having the things I love close to me. If you don't care about the show, just say that. No, that's fine. JK. But seriously, make sure you hit subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Go to 10minutemurder.com. There's all sorts of information there. And follow 10-Minute Murder any place that you are on social media. And one of the most consistent emails I get, not related specifically to a true crime case, is a question, "Hey Joe, how can we help your podcast? What's the best way to support you?" And I don't have any of those subscription things at the moment, and I may never have one. I'm still kind of iffy on that at this point. So I may never have that. I might have one in the future, so don't say, "Well, you said you'd never do it." I might. I don't know. So who knows about the subscription thing? But the biggest and best way you can help me with this podcast is to share it with your friends and family. And that's it. It costs $0. It just takes a little bit of time. And that alone helps this podcast grow more than I can even begin to describe to you. So if you really dig this podcast, first of all, I really appreciate that you're into it. And second, if you want to help, please share it with your friends and family. All right, that's it. That's your episode for today. And thank you again so much for listening to 10-Minute Murder.